Hey, this is Benji Ross of Awakening Lands, and this is the Returning Home podcast. If we want to live in healthy relationship with the places that we call home, with each other and with the rest of life, we have to understand what's actually happening around us. No one person can ever see the whole picture. We can get closer when we weave our experiences and perspectives together. This is one of the things we're exploring in the Returning Home practice. And in this episode, we have a story about how that kind of understanding becomes possible. It's the late 1960s, and a few college students are gathered on a shoreline of the lower Hudson River. They're there to watch the sunset. None of them would even consider taking off their shoes to dig their toes into that sand. There's a well-defined line marking high tide. And this line, it's black, and it's made of some kind of chemical gunk. There's a strong smell of kerosene in the air. The river has been one of the world's epicenters of the Industrial Revolution for over a century. Industrial and economic strength are central to national identity and culture. And with that comes a tolerance toward grime in the environment that later generations will have a hard time imagining. In 1965, the governor of New York, Nelson Rockefeller, said this about the Hudson. It's one great septic tank, rendered nearly useless for water supply, for swimming, or to support the rich life that once abounded. But the previous decade has seen major shifts in public opinion. The students discuss the health of the Hudson in ways that are just emerging in the American consciousness. They talk about Rachel Carlson's book, Silent Spring, and the consequences of the use of pesticides. They talk about Cleveland's Cuyahoga River recently catching on fire and can easily imagine it happening to the Hudson. They are part of a rapidly growing number of people who want to see the environment cleaned up. Times are changing. But as the sun sets, the students look out on the river and a living system that is completely overwhelmed. And the situation? Impossibly complex. They each stare silently into the distance with questions lingering in the air. How can we understand what is happening to the river? How can we even know what to do? These college students weren't alone. Also deeply concerned about the health of the river were the local fishermen, represented by the Hudson River Fishermen's Association. And they were joined by musician Pete Seeger, who along with a few others had an inspired idea. They built a replica of the early Dutch sailboats that were specifically designed to navigate the waters of the Hudson River. These were the working boats that were common before the arrival of the Industrial Revolution, before the river's waters had become so polluted. They named the boat the Clearwater. The Clearwater became a symbol, sailing atop a river that was anything but clear. But more than just a symbol, its decks began to host regular community meetings, offering a space for people to come together. It's fun to imagine those early gatherings on the newly constructed but old-timey feeling boat. Pete Seeger sometimes there, college students, environmentalists, local residents. It's actually pretty easy to picture what it would have been like, because to this very day, riverkeepers still meet on the decks of the Clearwater. And you can see recent photos on the Clearwater website, which we will link to in the episode show notes. In those early days, the air must have still been rank with pollution. It must not have been pleasant when the wind picked up and sprayed river water onto the group that was huddled on the boat discussing plans. They must have felt overwhelmed and uncertain, but perhaps they could also feel the power of forming themselves into a network, learning how to become the eyes and ears of the river. If they knew what was coming into the river, they'd see a much fuller picture of what was happening and what could be done about it. The volunteers were each assigned patches to explore and monitor. Many of them were college students, walking the river and tributaries. And this was no casual trek along the shoreline. These were thickly vegetated and polluted patches of land. One account mentioned plunging through poison ivy, scaling slimy walls, and grubbing under trash heaps in search of discharges. At the end of excursions, they would show up covered with mud and laden with bottles of gunk. Each volunteer was risking life and limb and, no doubt, significantly challenging their immune systems. Each time they went out, they were gathering individual experiences and perspectives and piecing together a fuller picture of what was happening. Imagine how it must have felt on the deck of the Clearwater, volunteers returning from inspecting their patches to share what they'd seen. There's one account of a pipe with significant evidence of sewage flushing out of a second-story window. Another specific account reported 47 discharges polluting the last 5 miles of Fishkill Creek, which is a completely ironic name. And of those 47 discharges, only 4 had been listed. And one of the patterns that became clear was that the worst of the polluting happened during rainstorms, at night, and on weekends, when it was easiest to hide. Together, they were bringing much-needed light to an industrial culture that would clearly be slow to change, along with a system of regulation that just wasn't yet up to the task. The picture they brought together offered a public with growing environmental awareness and concern visibility into a situation that no one could accept, with specific stories that appropriately would stir up people's emotions. And it was only possible because they discovered a way that they could learn to understand what was happening together, truly becoming the eyes, ears, and noses of the river. And this wasn't something anybody could do alone. With the passage of generations, it's easy to lose sight of how important and meaningful the early days of what we might call the environmental movement were. What this gritty and courageous group of mostly college students did is historically significant. The People's Pipewatch program, along with so many other efforts, helped shift what was considered acceptable treatment of the environment. These were big steps forward for all of us. Today, it's easy to feel frustrated by how far we still feel we have to go. When so much of life is under strain, it can all feel quite overwhelming. How important it is to be grateful for those college students and all the poison ivy rashes and time they must have spent scrubbing mystery materials off of their skin after an evening monitoring their patch. It's essential that we learn to come together as people of place, to share what we're seeing and experiencing, and to build a clear picture of reality. When we don't, it becomes much easier for the health of a local community and landscape to erode without really being noticed. But when we do, we can understand how we're doing and what is needed next. This is one of the things that we practice in returning home. If you're interested in developing a returning home practice of your own, maybe even inviting a few neighbors or a local group to join you, hop on to awakeninglands.com, where you'll see some free activities where you can begin. If you are liking it all, you can deepen from there. So here's a question I leave you with. What might be happening around you? What might become visible if you brought more perspectives together? With that, thanks for listening. Please share this with anyone you feel might like to hear this telling of the story of the People's Pipewatch program in the Clearwater, or anybody who might like to know about the still newly forming returning home practice. Thank you, and see you soon.